So we've got quite a few topics already on the agenda. Should we begin?
Yeah, do it.
Cool. All right. I'm just going to follow the order in which the topics are. If there is, anybody who wants their topic to be brought up first or anything or later, let me know. Okay. So the first topic is dashboard and RADOS, overview of current status and next steps. So this, I believe, will be led by Ernesto and Alfonso.
Shall we start?
Do you want to just kick it off?
Okay, thank you. Yeah. So, Alfonso, I think you're going to run the demo. We're basically going to do a demo around the support of RADOS specific stuff in the dashboard. For the future things or things to come, we will probably we're going to get your feedback and suggestions, and also know about the things that are new to RADOS and that you consider key for usability and that an operator should have in the dashboard. So, Alfonso, you want to add anything, or I will start with the demo?
Yeah, we can start. Well, the fact is, I was using KCLI and I have to add more hosts, but well, I can share my screen in order to do a quick walkthrough. So, are you able to see my screen?
Yep. Yes.
Okay. Right now, I have a minimal CFDM deployment with a manager and a dashboard and no OSDs right now. So mainly for the core utilities, we have this cluster area when we can see the host. Right now, I have only one host. I was planning to add 2 more. For example, we have the inventory here with the physical disks. Also, I have the 150 gigabytes and 120. Here we have the services that we have right now running. And if we click on the service, we can see the daemon type, the ID, the container ID, and some other details. Status, another information that should be relevant. And well, the plan here is to collect feedback on what should be showing. If we should show in or other relevant info that can be important, and all that kind of stuff. I can do a quick walkthrough, finish, and then go to the places that we think that we can be enhanced from the UI perspective in order to enhance the user experience. For example, here we have the OSDs. Right now I have no OSDs, so I will proceed to create some OSDs. So I can go to the primary devices and add. And right now, this is the current way of adding OSDs, is to try to apply some filters in order to proceed. So, for example, I will go for the type and select HDD. So I have applied a filter. If I click on add, then you can see that it is selected the 2 devices, the DVD and the PDC. And then if I go to the preview, then I can see the drive group specification from the orchestrator. And if I click on create, then it is proceed. Have this toasting. Here you can see notification. a bit.
Regarding this specific workflow, we've got recently a request from downstream QE on being able to specify the path for the filtering in the drive group. I think that's supported by the specification, but I'm not sure how useful is that for if there are specific use cases where we can foresee that a user would need to filter by a specific path or apart from the other fields that we are exposing right now.
Yeah.
Like dev disk bypass or something like that. Is that what you mean by
Yeah, I guess it's the block device path basically.
I think it depends a bit on what you want to do, right? If you have a day one situation and you want to create a lot of OSDs on a lot of hosts, then specifying the path might be a bit problematic. And on the other hand, if you just want to add a few OSDs on one specific new host or so, then having the path would make sense. So I think we kind of need both.
I think that we have discussed about this part of the dashboard and the orchestrator functionality, and we decide to do several things. Okay, I have put a link in the chat in order those that are interested in knowing what we discussed. That basically covers all the creation of OSDs and all the maintenance.
Thank you, Juanmi. Sebastian.
Yeah.
Okay, so we can assume that this would be a kind of day two operation, right? Rather than a day one.
I think so.
Okay.
I wouldn't be so strict. I wouldn't say no or yes. Depends on it depends a bit on what you want, right? If you have someone who's really unfamiliar with drive groups, then he will probably not understand them and will create mistakes, right? On the other hand, using the path on a lot of hosts is also going to be problematic.
It seems to me like, sorry.
Yeah, I don't have a clear answer. That's my problem that I have.
It seems to me like having a path as part of a drive group where it's going to map to multiple hosts or be some pattern matching doesn't sound very useful. But I guess in my mind, this case is like there's a specific drive on a specific host that I want to go create an OSD out of. And it seems like that's a slightly different workflow. It's almost like you want to go to the device inventory list and you see a disk that's available and you want a button that says create an OSD out of this disk. And it just does it. Right? Like that's what's going to happen when you've like replaced a disk or you've like swapped something or whatever. You just want to like go, okay, where's the disk? There it is. It's not used. Create OSD. And having to like navigate through the drive group treeing and set a bunch of filters so that you happen to find that one disk. Yes.
Okay, so
On the other hand, you don't want to go over each OSD if you have 1,000 OSDs that you want to create, right? So,
right. You don't use the drive group filtering stuff. Yeah.
Yeah, but for example, then for the use case when an end user wants to apply, just create one additional OSD in a certain disk, should it be supported from the UI perspective? Like, for example, this the device ID filter, so you can check one disk and then apply an OSD there?
I would say so, yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, I don't know how is the status of this there, by the way.
Yeah.
By the way, I noticed like SCA listed in some examples here. think we want to be careful about using persistent names for the disk as well. I think like SDA or SDB are liable to change with hardware changes or cross reboots potentially. I'm not sure if this is like something that needs to be considered in Ceph ADM or dashboard or.
So that's why we're looking at the device ID thing. That's basically the path, but it's more consistent across reboots.
Okay, great.
Yeah, there is I think that related to this, there was this, but I think this specification is not reliable, right? Relying on paths.
There are paths that are reliable and there are paths that aren't reliable. That's the trouble.
Yeah. Okay. So, well, we showed how to. Well, the way that the dashboard has implemented the OSD specification. Well, in my cluster, I should add more hosts in order to allow more OSD creation, but the thing is, we have to find ways to simplify this OSD creation. Apart from this, let me check.
What does it look like when you're trying to add a disk with a DB device as well? Are you recommending or making sure that the users are selecting like an appropriate sizing for the DB device?
Yeah, well, the fact is right now I run an empty of this to show it. I have to ask more. Let me add more hosts later, and then I can reshare my screen, and we can take a look at the DB devices.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah. Meanwhile, we can. I will finish my walkthrough, and I try to add a couple of more hosts.
One just quick comment. Really quick comment on the left. It says hosts and then inventory. Inventory is like the device, specifically the disk device inventory. I wonder if it makes sense to just rename that item physical disks or disk inventory or something. Yeah.
Okay, so we will take note about this suggestion. Yeah. And do we have an official document from retrieving all the feedback? I mean, for all the components, or should any component maintain its own document in order to have the minutes of all the developers?
I'm writing that down on a notepad, but I can put that in the third path. But perhaps it's going to be a bit messy, right? If we put everything there.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So an alignment between inventory and physical disks, so we can see the same. Okay. About the configuration, we have this. We have the configuration of the cluster. We have several levels: basic, advanced, and developer. So you can, based on this level, you can see or not see some cluster configuration settings. You can edit some settings here. So I don't know if regarding this, for example, this level, for the sake of simplicity, should we maintain this level filtering, or should we simplify the UI and not only allowing?
If you go back to the initial view, does it show like just all the settings that are actually set, or is it like if you remove the filters, clear filters, I guess? What do you see?
Yeah. If I clear the filters, you put the level any.
Yeah, okay. I wonder if this should look more like the Ceph config dump CLI output, where it shows only the settings that are set, regardless of the level, instead of showing all possible options, even though most of them, because there are like 1,000, 2,000 options, and most of them are never set.
Yep, I agree. How are you currently filtering these? Like, what is the basis? Well, why are we seeing only these options at the moment?
I think right now there is no filtering in place, but I remember in the past we were filtering by basic, so only the basic level were
No, the
displayed.
fact is if
So
you go
this
by
seems
default,
like,
basic is applied.
By default.
That's the thing.
Yeah.
okay. And if you remove the filters, you have everything in alphabetical order, and you see the first 10 entries.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, you have pagination here, so you can go until the last one.
Yeah, I think I agree with Sage. I don't think users need to see so many things.
Well, I would certainly like users to be able to find them if they want to find options that and be able to identify that they're valid and set them. So maybe some exceptional view one could choose.
Yeah, but the default view shouldn't have all of it, right?
Fair enough.
Yeah, it should look kind of like a config file, I guess, where it just shows you what settings are actually set. It means the view would be different because there's an extra column for what the section or scope of the option is, whether it's global or OSD 12 or whatever. But I think that's usually what people think is most useful to see and what they would expect to see. They want to know what their configuration is.
Okay. So, Ernesto, any other comment, or should we continue?
Continuing.
No, I think that's okay. I perhaps just wanted to go back to the USDs because I don't think you mentioned, for example, the flag setting for USDs and also the recovery profile. Those things that maybe are worthy to mention. A quick mention in those.
Okay, let me check. You mean this, right? The cluster-wide RD flags? Yeah. I forgot. Well, let me first select one. You can see the flags here, and you can apply the flags, for example. Let's see the no out. Down. So here in the flags column, you can see that there are these flags applied. Here we have also the recovery priority sample. Well, this with these levels. Priority. And also this page scrap options. I don't know if again, well, I from our understanding, right now this is already available for the user, but I don't know if we have put some info, but I don't know if this info should be enough. These briefly descriptions that we have with this information, or should we put more info for the user, or should we understand that it is enough, all this info that we have, for example?
Are these per OSD or are these cluster-wide options? Missed where you.
I think these are cluster-wide, all of them.
I think.
Okay.
We go for.
Yeah, PG scrap. Okay.
Yeah.
So I wonder for like for the recovery stuff, we have sort of we've tried to simplify this from the configuration standpoint, right? So we don't have so many knobs. I don't remember what the current iteration of simplified option is, but we should probably try to align whatever the dashboard is presenting to have that be the thing that.
Yeah, everything. Essentially, you can override some of the defaults, but under the hood, it auto-tunes all the values at the moment. With Pacific, we also have new mclog-based profiles, which we could add to the dashboard. Which will always have a default, but if the user wants to change the profile. It should just be like select ABC from ABC and it'll do everything under the hood. So all the recovery, sleep, and max backfills, everything should just go away when somebody is using mclock. I think these kind of details, I think Ernesto, Alfonso, we need to reiterate and have a separate discussion and go into the details.
Yeah. Okay. Okay.
Yeah, noted.
Okay.
So that's just only for the recovery, right? Not for the scrubbing. There is no profiles, rebuild
So
profiles for the.
Yeah, with a scheduler change, it applies to scrub as well.
Okay.
And all the scrub, like some scrub settings, let's just say that. So that's what I said. Let's have a separate meeting to describe which of those settings should not appear when we're using scheduler.
Just it's sort of a separate comment on just the UI. I wonder if it would. It's a little bit confusing to me that there's this drop down with cluster-wide stuff, but it's on a page that has all these OSCs listed. So when a dialog pops up, it's not obvious whether this is like came because you clicked on something on the OSD or whatever. I wonder if it would make more sense if these cluster-wide options were just like different tabs. So there's an OSD list tab, and then there's one for like cluster flags or scrub.
You mean when selected the OSD? Then it should
just
appear,
like the items in this cluster-wide option,
here.
this cluster-wide configuration.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, if these three things were just more tabs, so instead of OSD list, it would be OSD list, flags, recovery, scrub, overall performance.
Yeah, we were discussing that, where to put that drop down. Okay.
Yeah. It'd be like a different kind.
So I think that's mostly about the cluster wide, and also per OSD, you can also set flags and trigger the scrap, all that stuff.
Okay.
Okay. Then, apart from this, well, we have here some, when you select an OSD, several information. The metadata, for example.
Should we split those into essential information and super advanced information?
Sorry, what two types of information?
Useful information and advanced information.
Yeah, that's been a long-standing topic, having a kind of advanced mode or basic, mid-advanced modes, so you can narrow down the amount of information you're displaying.
Yeah.
That makes full sense.
As long as we reach out consensus about what is useful and more detailed information, it can be done. So it's a matter of having consensus here, and it can be done. Here we have the device health.
I've been just a comment. I've been asking for help from the UX design team for over 2 years on this, and it is not a priority to get help on Ceph dashboard.
Yeah.
So anyone that can help, anyone that can have an opinion and can push those guys, please help. So thank you.
Just to comment one.
We can have some more iterations over these. I think the whole OSD configuration and how we display stuff and what is important, what is not. We can have separate discussions. In the interest of time, I just want to, we have 13 topics and we're almost like, half hour into the meeting. What other major topic areas do you want to cover except for the OSD section in the dashboard, Ernesto and Alfonso?
Yeah. We were doing just showing the cluster area of the dashboard in the sense that if there is any missing feature that you think that from the RADOS team should be there here in the dashboard, and you have noticed that something is not there and should be, for example, it can be a great feedback for us. Because if we finish quickly the walkthrough, we have the crash map viewer.
Mm-hmm.
you select the OSD, you have some info here. You have also the manager modules, so you can, for example, select a module from the dashboard. Well, you have the details about the settings, but you can click on edit, and then if I want, I can edit some setting, and this will be reflected like a Ceph config dump. For example, if I want to put the RGW secret key and the access key, I can do it in a graphic manner in order to have access to the object gateway, for example. Then you update, and it gets updated, and if you do a Ceph config dump, you will see the changes. And for in the list of the manager modules, we can see what are enabled and what are always on. For example, and I don't know if we should add any other relevant info here about the modules, or we are okay here. For example, the CVM.
Can we also like disable or turn something off from there? Let us say I want to turn some module off. How do I do that?
Yeah, you can do that. With the drop down, you select one of the.
Yeah. For example, you mean not the CVM? Well, I'm looking at one that is not always on. But yeah, here. I'm looking for one that is not always on. For example, the RESTful edit.
Now you have to click on the downward arrow to enable or disable the start and stop the module. The drop down menu.
I'm looking at this one that is harmless. Yeah.
Main issue with this is that as soon as you disable a module, the whole manager becomes unresponsive.
Yeah. Let me check. It's here. Okay. So you see that it's not enabled?
Cool.
Perfect.
I can enable
and I
it.
think last quick thing would be, Alfonso, to show quickly the pulse area, which I think is the other RADOS-wise thing that we're displaying in the dashboard.
Okay.
Recently, there's been added support for easy configuration, so now we can configure the C profiles from the UI itself.
Well, let me create a pool. The size of it. It's an RB tag, for example. Well, we have here also the quality of service, just in case we want to put the RBD configuration to tweak these settings, but if you remove the RBD tag, then it's no longer shown. With any other tag, it doesn't appear, but for RBD, this one. Okay, so
can you change the rule to a different rule? Seems now it's disabled now, but you did a different crash rule for the pool.
I think that you should create a crash rule then. Let's see that I do a crash rule. Then you should be able to select a custom crash rule.
Yes, but if you need the more sophisticated crash rule, you need to do it on your own on the server side.
Yeah, probably.
Yeah.
I think it only supports the domain failure and nothing much more than that.
But you will be able to select a rule which exists on the server, but not.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay,
and
so
if you select an easy pool type, you can also
the pool
create and edit
yeah.
the.
Yeah, if it's erasure or replicated, you mean? The placements.
Yeah, but you have to select the erasure code pool.
Yeah.
And then you can create a specific profile.
Yeah. Here, there's the same way to create an erasure code profile. Well, here we have some info about how it's any setting. Well, we assume that this extra info should be enough for the end user.
I want to hide that directory option. That's not actually something we want to support.
Sorry?
That directory option at the bottom, we probably want to hide that.
Can you repeat, please?
The directory option at the bottom, we should hide that. Yeah, in reality.
Hide it, you mean?
Hide it, okay. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, we can't actually add extra plugins.
Well, I think for the sake of time, I mean, there's a lot of items on your list today, and we got on the agenda because we basically don't think enough people use this and give us feedback. So overall, we'd love to see that. We'd love to see you come to the dashboard meeting and use this on occasion. Give us that feedback we need. Otherwise, this product won't be what our customers need, let alone our engineers. I'd love to see everyone use this on a regular basis. I mean, so overall, please send feedback. Please help us. With the features that we require moving forward. I mean, it's an absolute must for that. Otherwise, it will not be successful. And at some point, I mean, Sebastian's going to talk about dashboard at SUSE and their successes. It may be hopefully our next Ceph meeting. There'll be some interesting discussions at that about SUSE's success and failures with Ceph and all these varying tools. So anyway, I just wanted to add that. So.
And just for the benefit of everyone here, I see on the calendar there's a Ceph dashboard stand-up almost daily, but it's at like 3:30 a.m. my time. Is there another dashboard stand-up that's at a later time?
We have the biweekly sync. Now I'm not sure what time is there, but it's 3 p.m. European time. So we can try to. I think in the past you joined that. So we may try to look for a slot where we can all gather. Okay. Thank you, folks. Cool. Thank you, Neha.
All right. Thanks so much.
Thank you, Ernesto. Thank you, Alfonso. I think we have more than what we need. I'm very impressed that it's almost like, we have to eliminate things first.
No, the fact is, have to look at, because I should have added two more hosts in order to have a healthy cluster. Yeah, but
no, that's fine. That's fine.
Next time I
get the idea. I get the idea. So let's meet more often. We can discuss that how.
Okay.
Thanks. All right. The second topic here is about review crash telemetry panels. Yari, do you want to lead this?
Sure.
Thanks.
So, yeah, I linked another Etherpad that has few links. There's a link to a Sentry dashboard that has. Sorry. So first of all, I don't know if everybody knows we're collecting telemetry data and some basic data about the cluster and data about crashes and sometimes data about the disks of the clusters. And now we're going to focus specifically on the crashes data collected. So the Sentry link is the first one. I don't know if you guys can access that. You need to have the Ceph membership of GitHub, both the team and the organization. Oh, okay, thanks. I don't know who shared the screen. I was about to do that.
Yeah, go for it.
No, it's okay, Sage. It might be even faster. Still having network problems, so I can try if you want, but yeah.
I got it.
Cool. So right now, only the last 30 days of the data that we collected from crashes could be imported to Sentry. There is an issue with importing older events. And there's another issue with the latest 7 days, but we're handling that. The main idea is to integrate the reviewing of these crashes daily when we're doing bug scrubbing so that we actually get value out of it. So I don't know, Neha, Josh, Stage, if you want to suggest ideas of how we can actually integrate looking at them daily. There is one thing that still in process, which is to enhance the daily emails. Once we know where exactly to link them to, we will have on the daily emails just a summary of the latest 24 hours and 14 days with the new crashes that were reported through telemetry, and then we can link to either Sentry or the other Grafana instance and decide how to proceed with opening correlating tracker issues for them.
Yeah, I mean, ideally we'd have this nice. The Redmine plugin for Sentry is pretty useless. So I think we need to probably write around just so we can link these to tickets. But even without that, I'm hoping we can incorporate this into our bug scrub routine, so that in addition to looking at the tracker issues, we also look here. And you know, I mean, IO error we can ignore obviously, but you know, here's some random issue. That one's only one event. But if we sort by events and find things that users are actually hitting, like here's an RGW issue that hopefully affecting 2 different users, and it looks like it's just crashing repeatedly on this particular thing. You can tell what versions are being affected. Here somewhere, Ceph version, the frequency over time. And ideally we'd have this link to the tracker issue so you'd be able to see. Until then, like maybe we can come up with some, like we ignore it once it's solved or resolved, or I don't know. It's kind of hard to link it to the without actually having it linked. I guess that there isn't quite a, like, you can't have a custom state. Maybe we just pay attention, try to remember. But you know, here's some BlueFS errors, for example. Yeah, I mean, is it just a matter of bookmarking this for all the leads, do you think, to get people looking at this on a regular basis? What do you guys think?
I mean, at least the way I use Sentry at the moment is not like to do bug scrub, but when I see issues that can be used, that can be tracked using Sentry, I do link it back to the tracker. Or if I open a tracker, I link the Sentry event associated with it. So anybody looking later can go and see, what is the frequency or when it started occurring and all that kind of stuff. But yeah, I think it'll be useful if we could make this, more unique failures that, are happening over a week. This could be part of our bug scrub routine.
Yeah, I mean, the bug scrubs are usually once a week, which isn't ideal, which is why I guess why those daily emails will probably still be important. But seems like at least once a week we should be checking this just to see, like on the latest stable point release, like what crashes are people still hitting, because that should be guiding our fixes. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's something we discussed, Yarit, right? Like, when we do a point release, we start tracking then on, what kind of unique crashes have started appearing, which did not appear earlier. That is a clear data point of what we need to focus on, or if there is a regression, particular release. I think the questions we had was like, when do you start tracking, or like, we currently have like these 14 days of crashes that we then make that more useful and have separate sections. Like, let us say we did a 15 to 10, any unique crashes in 15 to 10 get grouped together separately, so that clearly catches attention, or we focus on those. Maybe the grouping aspect could be improved a little bit there.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Okay. Maybe it's worth mentioning that the entire database is browsable through the other dashboard, and there's lots of search options there as well. So if there are new crashes reported on the latest point release, you can also see if it was reported prior to that. And
that's a very good point. I mean, I don't know if you have the ability to share your screen, but a search page where you have multiple substrings and how you can filter versions, that will be really useful.
Can you see it on my screen?
Yep.
Yes.
Okay, cool. So that's the other dashboard. Has all sorts of panels with the statistics according to versions and other parameters as well. And I just wanted to focus on, maybe this is the most interesting part. You can see how many new crash, we call it fingerprints because we try to group together similar crashes. So for example, in the last 30 days, you can see that there are about 300 new fingerprints that were never seen before. So obviously these are all 15. Well, it's not that accurate because if all of a sudden there's a cluster that started reporting and they're running Mimic, so we will see new crash fingerprints of 13 here. So these will be outliers. But there are a lot of filtering that you can do here. You can specifically filter a certain point release here and focus just on that. The miner affected column will show you all the miner affected of that specific crash signature. And that's on purpose, because if all of a sudden you see something weird on a certain point release, you can see all the other versions that were affected by that as well. And then you can do some more drill downs. You can see when it was first reported. You can see the actual stack trace of that signature. And you can also see all the occurrences. This goes a couple of years later back, but you can change it here, of course. And if you want to see the actual crash itself, oops, that's the cluster. You can see just the crash ID, and here you have the actual backtrace that wasn't filtered, and all of the captured details from that crash. So it's easily browsable. And by the way, if you see a certain function that catches your attention, you can just click on it, and you'll see all of the fingerprints that actually contain this. So, and you can keep filtering by more functions on the sectors that has the same one. So it'll be nice if it'll be used more often. So maybe we can find some interesting things from this data.
Awesome. Okay.
I might lost my audio. I'm sorry.
No, we can hear you. We can hear you fine.
Okay.
Cool. This is great. Anything else, Yari, do you want to cover, or are we good?
I think it's good.
Thank you so much.
Perfect. Thank you. All right. The next topic is about Cluestore blood cache improvements, but I do not see any of the interested parties on the call, so maybe we will skip that for now, and if Igor, Adam, or Mark join later, we can cover it. So moving on, we've got immutable content optimizations, and this is Loic.
Yes.
Okay, Loic, do you want to just take over?
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Cool. So there, we'll try to keep it short because it's kind of a little bit out of topic. So there are three of us. First, Massimo is from University of Pise, and his focus is on streaming data and high performance computing. And there is also Nicolas Dandrimont, who is here listening, and he's working for Software Heritage, which is an initiative to collect all the source code available in the world and produced by humanity and keep it safe, the same way archive.org does. So the problem that we faced, and there is me, Loic, and I'm actually from a company which is called Easter Eggs. That's not a joke, it's actual company name. The date is funny about that. And I'm working with Software Heritage on a very specific use case, which is to help them use Ceph to store their ever-growing archive of fairly small objects. So most of the objects, 75%, are under 16K, and about half of them are under 4K. This is This is a pattern that also is common to Facebook when they store a lot of images. Also LinkedIn for the same kind of data, and it grows to petabytes of data. It also shares commonalities with EOS, which is the storage system of the CERN in which they store much bigger objects, but they have billions of them. So when we try to use Ceph for that, small objects, and there are tens of billions of them, the problem that we faced is twofold, really. It's space amplification. That is, we want to save space, so we use an erasure-coded pool, but unfortunately, there is a space amplification that in Ceph grows over 35% of the total storage. So no matter how hard we try, there is a very significant space amplification because the objects are too small. And the second problem is enumeration. That is what software heritage is about. The users of software heritage, most of them are researchers, and they're trying to apply algorithms on the whole corpus. And these algorithms need to work all the objects. But when there are billions of them, there currently are 10 billions, then it can take a very long time if you try to enumerate them one after the other. So when trying to figure out how to help with both problems, we stumbled upon the solution that LinkedIn found in their system, which is called Ambry. And essentially what they did is grouping the objects together. That's a fairly simple solution. So they take millions of objects, they put it in a one big 100 gigabyte container, and that allows them to more efficiently take all the objects together and apply an algorithm to it, also mirror it, replicate it, but it also saves them of the problem of space amplification, because then you can put the object on top of each other. All this wouldn't work at all if it was read-write objects. That is, it's not flexible enough. But the commonality of all these workloads is that they are immutable objects. And so we can leverage this property by packing them together, and that actually works. There is no drawback. So for software heritage, what we're doing this year is to use Ceph and pack the objects into an RBD image, so that we get the benefit of everything that we just talked about. The thing is, it's on top of Ceph, and it will be fine, but it's yet another software to solve this fairly old problem, because the first time Facebook published something about that specific workload was in about 10 years ago. And nowadays, you would think that software storage, a distributed storage, natively provides something that solves the problem and you don't have to do anything. But it's not the case. So there we go. What if Ceph provided something that would help this use case, so that software heritage, Facebook, LinkedIn just need to use Ceph out of the box, and it just works. There is no space amplification, and if you want to enumerate all the objects, it goes as fast as if you were doing an rsync on 100 gigabyte worth of volumes. And I don't know if it's possible, because I've worked before I go into the ideas that we got, I would like to probe you, everyone here. Have you heard of that? Do you have ideas? Is there already something that we missed?
I think there are certainly a lot of ideas like this out there, and certainly one we've talked about in the past a bunch is batching at the RGW layer. I think one of the major aspects of this that's difficult is the listing piece. At the RADOS level, since Ceph is starting objects across the cluster, you're treating them each as an individual RADOS objects and trying to do listing across all of those. It's a very different sort of design than when you're talking about packing a bunch of objects together. You're no longer kind of hashing them according to their name. You're kind of trying to group them together in some way.
And yes, Yehuda?
That sounds like a candidate for a zipper backend.
Think of the same thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean,
can you provide some background for what a zipper is?
Well, Zipper is part of an extension system being developed for RGW that allows filtering basically stackable drivers and things. So you could, I think, who's imagined this is a driver filter, driver for RGW. But I think in general, in RGW is where we would want to put this. We're definitely interested in incorporating packing support. And we recognize some challenges in the indexing, but we would like to solve it. So this is definitely a place where we would accept this and encourage it, try to help with it.
I think one of my questions, I guess, is how this is used. Like in your case, Loic, when you prepare these big RBD images, is there this whole sort of offline phase where you pack it all together and you build an index and you put the index at the front and then you import that into Ceph?
Exactly.
Like, I would imagine that once this is in Ceph, like you want the index like in the front so you can do fast listing of the names of objects and look up a specific object that's in this big blob. And that's a little bit challenging to do if you're like sort of slowly doing these over time. But yeah, I think it would be helpful to have maybe a set of constraints to better understand how it would be used. Like what are the ingestion workloads? Like is it like a trickle of files that are sort of randomly accumulated, or is it like a serial import of a linear sweep of a file system or whatever? And then also what are the subsequent workloads, like the batch export or specific file or so on. So I think understanding what those workloads look like and what the expectations are there would help drive with the design.
Yeah, I suppose that's part of the problem because it varies. I focused on the workload of software heritage, which is fairly easy to understand because they collect elements and then stack them, and then you can say after 10 million objects or 100 gigabyte, okay, now I close this, and this is immutable. We add an index, as you said. And then when you read, you can look up the index, and if it's a perfect hash table, then you have fairly quick access to the individual object. And then there is the mirroring part, which is again fairly easy because you just want to send the 100 gigabyte object to someone else. Now, if it's implemented as a RGW filter driver, as is suggested, would that allow for that kind of order of magnitude change? Would it be feasible to stack them into gigabytes and gigabytes of single object? That's what I don't quite see.
Well, I'm not sure that the filter driver explains all of it for what RGW would do, but RGW might be using that filter in order to do listings or to incorporate edits. There's also, and this is valuable. This your post to Ceph develop reminded us to think about this more. There are other workloads that have been proposed for object packing with S3 object storage. Historically, XSky came in with a group of them, and that are used in hyperscale deployments. We're not sure which ones. Where you just have lots of smaller S3 objects and you'd like to pack them into some intermediate form. And that probably is not the kind of object scales that your proposal has, but we might want to be able to reuse some machinery.
Oh, that's interesting. Okay. Yeah. Was there any other area in Ceph where that kind of workload was, or rather more generically, taking advantage of immutable objects? Was that ever discussed?
I mean, we have had some discussions around RADOS pools that have different access semantics, where they might be immutable, or when you create a new object, you know that it has a unique name or something like that, because those would affect the way that the replication and recovery algorithms work. But I think those are different because they don't really address the problem of tiny objects and bulk import and export and so on. So my gut says having it layered over RADOS in RGW or RBD like you're doing or something is going to make more sense.
Okay, great.
At least for me.
So that actually we can skip the first idea because then we talked about it. The second idea is actually we can skip it too, I think, because it would be more relevant in RGW and bulk reads. I guess that's where I'm a little hesitant, because when I thought about it, the benefit of packing, let's say, at least 1 million objects together, that having at least 10 gigabyte worth of something that you can mirror, seemed like a good way to change the order of magnitude of the problem. And I still don't see if RGW can provide that kind of change, if that makes any sense.
I think if I'm understanding correctly, the key benefit is the ability to access the data both on a granular basis, so you can look up an individual object with reasonable efficiency, and also on a bulk basis where you grab like an entire archive of 100 gigs of them efficiently. So you can sort of being able to do that bimodal access pattern. And so I think it's not like immediately obvious that Zypper is just going to solve the problem. Like it might be able to do packing, but allowing both bulk access and granular access. I'm not sure if it would do that or not.
I don't think Zypper does, but by itself. But Zypper is a way to do inline edits of the requests to direct it to do something specific. But my sense is this probably involves. I mean, I want you to jump in here too. We've talked about this a bit, and the object manifest that RGW has allow for objects to have alternate structures that it can be arbitrary, and another piece probably would be asynchronous processing after ingest. To ingest these into their packed form, or to do later compactions if we make edits. Your system never makes edits, but others might. So and Zypper I think gives you inline access to retarget, to make more flexible access patterns instead of RGW. If we see that we're looking for something that has a more complicated, as an alternate access path, other than our bucket index, or then we have some tool in the RGW flow to splice it in. Would you add something to that or adjust that?
Yeah, Zypper is not going to solve everything magically. It's just like the framework where everything will need to be created, right? That's one thing. Just a side note, that access pattern where you have multiple separate objects and then you can read everything in one go reminded me of the Swift, the terrible Swift large object implementation. So RGW already does something like that, where you can pack multiple objects as a one logical entity, but
it does.
that wouldn't be the way to go.
It's an older of implementation, but it does do that, and the pieces are all like as in your workflow, the pieces are visible, sort of the inverse of it. But in Swift object storage, like these live objects, the pieces are themselves objects that something uploaded, and then it uploaded a rule for combining them.
Right.
Yeah. So to answer, I think, your specific question, Loic, then RGW does support logical S3 objects of sizes of terabytes, so that's not a problem. I think the broader concern is that most of these projects have very different ratios of data to metadata to how many disk IOs they can afford per packed object to put it in or to read it, and we don't have a great place for building the giant memory caches that something like Haystack tended to have to amortize the lookup times. And I mean, RGW is the place to build something like this in the Ceph ecosystem, but you're going to need to look very carefully at whether we are trying to whether objects are pre-packed before RGW gets them, or whether we can afford to write a bunch of 4 kilobyte objects into RGW and then have RGW read them out and rewrite them into the packed form and delete them. Whether lookups can afford to go find do the RGW generic object lookup to find the packed location, and then look at the index of that packed object and then do the actual read. And that's my concern with something like this, especially if we're trying to do a generic implementation. We expect to work across a large range of anything. Is that because I think the Haystack paper had a lot of math to demonstrate that what their constraints were and that their design hit them.
True. Unfortunately, we don't have the implementation, but yeah. It did. So one that's okay. Yeah, sorry.
Yeah, I'd say one last comment. Again, I think it would be really helpful to have just something written down to better understand what that ingest workload is. So, for example, if you're ingesting a project at a time or something, where it's RBOL of a particular version of software or whatever, so the files are all localized within a tree or the branch of the hierarchy, all grouped together already, then that's easier to sort of graft into some larger view of reality. Whereas if you're just getting random files spread across all different parts of the namespace all at once,
it's really completely opaque objects pushed, and we know nothing about them.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
Unfortunately. Yeah.
Makes it harder. Okay.
And so there was one last item. It's the ability to stream the object out of Ceph. So the general idea is there seems to be an ecosystem developing of layers that transform database updates, for instance, into streams like Kafka streams, and people developing software to analyze these streams to do various stuff. And they are interested in having different backends from which they can read objects. So currently there are an ecosystem, and they know Postgres, they know MySQL, they know other backends, they don't know Ceph. And I was wondering, and that's where Massimo is most interested in, if Ceph has, so it would be maybe RGW that allows to plug in this kind of backend, so it's made available as a stream of objects somewhere, which would help, again, with mirroring, and again, the speed of this mirroring would matter. I don't know if it makes sense, or that does not ring any bell. Okay. Okay. Well, unless Nicola or Massimo have anything else to add, that's all I had.
No, thanks.
Okay. Well, thank you very much. And so we'll be looking forward to examining how RJW does that or could do that. Yeah. Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thanks.
All right. Next topic is about Ceph manager improvements. So this would be Josh and me probably. Josh, do you want to kick off?
Sure. So we talked about a number of improvements for in the shorter term in the CDM in November. So today I wanted to focus more on larger scale improvements like scaling out the manager and dealing with scalability issues in general there. So there's kind of two categories here. But let's start with this, the scaling out the manager in general. There are a number of different ways to do this, but perhaps one simple way to do it would be to try to decouple the manager core from the modules, like move them to the modules to a separate process that could be on the same host, could be on different hosts. This gets us out of the problem of using subinterpreters in Python, which aren't actually supported anymore by Python, or and isolates the modules from each other so that if one has a problem, it doesn't take down another one. Also lets us easily, say, restart a particular module or reload a particular module without affecting others. It does make probably the deployment model a little bit more complex because you need something like Ceph ADM to understand that it needs to deploy a bunch of processes and manage those, and you need to do all the same kind of like failure detection and restarting that you would for a single manager process with many processes. But the bright side is that these are all stateless. So if anytime one goes down, you restart it. It's not a very complex operation. It doesn't require much complex recovery. And the key piece that you need there is like a proxy layer like HAProxy, which we already often deploy with the dashboard to be able to stand in front of whatever API endpoints we may be exposing there. But that's something that we already need. So a first version of this could look like the core manager is the only thing that is processing all the current things it does, like the OSD map, the PG map, the PG stats, the configuration updates. And whenever a module needs to access that information, it talks to the manager to get that. There are only a couple modules out there today that access every single update, and like those ones are like the insights module and the progress module. And we're actually looking to change that behavior, since it actually causes more problems than it solves, and it's not really necessary to their function. So they could be polling for this information periodically, say every 5 seconds, 10 seconds, 60 seconds, depending on load. So that means there's a little bit of extra latency for getting this kinds of information. But for a lot of the common modules, it shouldn't be so bad. I think the one I think could have more impact on what might be the dashboard. I'm not certain how frequent its calls are. It could be some level of caching that could be helpful there. We discussed that a little bit, the CDM in November too. And Ernesto, maybe you have a better idea. Or Alfonso?
The frequency of these calls, you mean?
For like the dashboard, like how often is it accessing kind of common data that is coming from the core manager?
Yeah, for a single user, it's every 5 seconds. We're right now working on a caching layer for decoupling that, and so we don't really need to poll the manager API so often. So we can keep the data inside the module itself.
So this caching structure could be a shared caching structure across modules, right? It doesn't necessarily need to be only for the dashboard.
Yeah, that's what we're exploring right now. I will share the link to the Tracker issue here. That's it. In fact, Wad and Per are going to do that, going to explore that part. So we can generalize that and also include the C++ side if we want to perform the caching there.
Yeah, they started doing some profiling first in order to apply this cache, because it can be done at several levels, not only at manager level or API level or dashboard level. It can be done on several layers. Yeah.
Yeah, it sounds pretty helpful. What layer is it? Are you developing it for right now?
Right now there are some existing caches, like for example the controllers, the HTTP controllers. There's this view cache, which is caching things, for example, like the RVD images or the pools. And apart from that, I think we have some caching in the front end as well. So we're also avoiding the browser to fall in the backend. So, but I think in the case of the dashboard, we will probably need to bring this kind of layered approach, because there are multiple places where this dashboard can have multiple users. So technically, every user could trigger a load, and we want to limit that.
Sure, that makes sense. Yeah, and certainly only the backend caches, which makes sense to share between different modules. The one aspect that this doesn't address is modules that might potentially need to scale beyond a single process. I'm not sure that we have any of those currently. I think the one that has been a bottleneck is Prometheus, and maybe a better approach there would be to change the way we're reporting Prometheus data to go directly to Prometheus itself from each of the nodes, instead of funneling it all through a single manager or even a few manager processes. I'm not sure how much value we're getting out of that extra processing there.
Yeah, it's simpler for a small cluster, but it doesn't scale super well, I guess. Can I ask a couple, just like a high-level question about what is the high-level goal here to scale to a larger cluster? Like,
yeah, the high-level goal is to scale to a larger cluster, right?
Because I'm wondering if the approach we take to scale the manager is to basically separate out modules into separate manager processes, then that limits the ceiling to what we can get is the number of manager modules, right? Like if we have 10 manager modules, then at most we can scale 10 times bigger. But I think the reality is that we don't actually have that many. Only a few of the manager modules are actually scaling issues. Like Prometheus is a big one, but that one sort of maybe set that one aside because we can address it separately.
Yeah.
There's the dashboard. There's Ceph ADM.
Yeah, we could do this for just a few modules that are the heaviest.
Which ones? I don't know which ones. Like
the other ones that have been problematic are like the progress module, instance module, because of that non-polling behavior. So if we address the make them poll instead of processing every update, I think they won't be an issue.
Yeah.
I guess some of it with the balancers that we had issues with the balancer.
Yes.
Yeah. I guess it seems like if we sort of address those piecemeal, then there's only if I count on one hand, like the remaining modules that are problematic. And so I'm wondering if the cost benefit of the complexity of breaking these things out is going to be limited. The benefit will be limited by one hand, I guess. That makes sense.
To what extent, too, is the issue with the HTTP runtime that the manager currently has? To what extent is that playing a role, if any?
I don't think the HTTP runtime is an issue per se. I mean, things like that's only used by a few modules, not by everything.
Or single-threaded runtime in general, maybe I should say. But
Yeah, that's the larger.
Seems like that might be the bigger issue. Yeah, like I
I
wonder
mean,
if
that would justify. I mean, I hate to say it this way, but that would justify a rewrite to go something like Golang or something all by itself. If we, it doesn't solve scaling problems that are all topologically naturally solved, but it is quite a limiting environment itself.
I don't think it requires a rewrite, but using more than one process in Python is possible.
Yeah, I mean, like it instead of imagining different daemons on different hosts. I mean, maybe that actually is a similar path to go down, but like just forking and having independent Python interpreters and using IPC to communicate so that you're not like the idea of having REST gRPC for those like cross module calls is kind of scary to me because that's like a huge amount of latency in most of those. I mean, I guess there probably aren't that many of those calls that we can go audit them, but I'm not sure that they would expect or necessarily behave well with that.
Well, I'm not sure how many there are at all. Like I think the only ones I'm familiar with are the calls to update the progress module, which aren't latency sensitive.
Yeah. But my guess is that like the manager is using like, a couple of cores probably at peak, like on a large cluster when it's like getting hammered, only using a few cores, and like modern machines have like dozens of cores. Like I wonder if our scaling isn't
scale up more
about,
first.
Yeah. If there are ways to do that without.
It's true, but Python runtimes also have about an order of magnitude more overhead than something that compiles to native code, and that might actually matter.
Yeah.
Regarding this,
once you've separated out into multiple processes, it would be a lot easier to go one at a time and convert to Golang for the ones that are actually performance sensitive.
That's actually true. I would agree with that.
Yeah.
Yeah, regardless of the interface they use to communicate, as long as you have some interface you're communicating with different processes, that does make them fairly independent.
Mm.
The balancer is probably the one that I'd be most concerned about in terms of CPU usage today, because it's one of large clusters that does take up a significant chunk of CPU time.
Yeah.
I imagine Ceph ADM and the dashboard could as well.
The manager under heavy pressure, or is there any possibility to create some workflow to achieve this?
I think that's a great idea. It doesn't exist today.
Yeah. No, I was wondering if we have the resources, the machines, to try to set up a stress testing job and see how it goes.
We have a lot of machines. We don't usually use them that way, but we certainly could. Like we could build a cluster, however many Smithy we have, like 150, 200. We could build a big cluster.
For stress testing, like certain aspects of things, like you could, like the balancer, you could create a cluster with tons and tons of PGs with no data.
Yeah, a lot of it you can just simulate too.
Yeah, even the progress module, right? A lot of events.
Yeah.
What kinds of stress testing are you thinking would be useful for like the dashboard, Alfonso?
Yeah, for example, creating hundreds of a lot of OSDs, a lot of RBDs, thousands of buckets. For example, for dashboard, I can imagine several testing and retrieving info. That info, for example, retrieving thousands of buckets, 10,000, for example, or 1,000 RBD images, because we are doing listing and we are trying every time to improve the way we retrieve the info. But for example, we are working on the cache layer because we know there are some bottlenecks, but it would be great to have a stress testing job that we can see clearly where are the bottlenecks. Because in my laptop, I cannot fully recreate a heavy environment. So it would be great to have some lab or some machines dedicated just to put a lot of stress in a cluster. I don't know. I don't know. For example, an upstream consumer like the CERN, it would be good at least, for example, I don't know if the stress that the CERN put on Ceph is something more realistic. I don't know what are the exact figures that the CERN is using for Ceph. I don't know how many OSDs, how many RBDs or RGW. But if we can retrieve this data and create some more
Yes,
realistic.
they're one of our biggest users, and they have reported like issues with the progress module, if I remember correctly, were reported by them. So we can definitely find out what their scale looks like at the moment.
Yeah, it seems like we could simulate a lot of these things too. Like, could manage our fake cluster that has pretends it has tons and thousands of OSDs and thousands of RGWs and RBD images. Exactly. It doesn't have to be the same actual scale. Yeah. That would be able to stress the dashboard quite a bit.
Yeah, like Prometheus might be another one if we just spin up like a bunch of fake OSDs that are sending manager reports, whatever it is. I guess my like high level thought is basically that it seems like there are sort of lower hanging fruit where there are existing issues that are sort of independently addressed, make the current, even with the current architecture, just perform better, like the notifies, and so on. And if we address those independently, we can keep that the splitting up the manager card in our back pocket. Don't close that door, but hopefully not. I'm not sure I would.
Yeah, I agree. It's not the first thing to do. I think definitely we want to address the progress module and insights notification consumption first. But I think like we've already seen the balancer and other modules consuming a lot of CPU, so it might be time to think about that splitting out, and even with a single host into multiple processes.
It might be that like the balancer module is a good example where it doesn't actually have to talk to other manager modules. It only talks to the manager, so it could be in a separate interpreter and a separate. Well, I don't know. It might be easier to break that one out, I guess, than the others. That's what I was getting at. But the Python interpreter constraints are sort of bizarre.
Yeah, as soon as we're breaking one thing out, though, it makes it relatively easy to break out other things too.
I mean, it could also be that it just shouldn't be written in Python.
Well, it's not written in Python. It's calling everything, calling into C++.
I know, but it's like building these huge lists and matrices and whatever. Like it's doing a lot of.
Yeah, all the times in the C++ code though.
Oh, is it? Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
But maybe we could do something more with multi-threading there with the C++ layer, changing the broader architecture.
Yeah.
It's like we need to tag some of these items as hanging versus medium term and longer term. If low and medium don't work, we definitely need our longer term plans to be sorted out. Yeah, talking of manager modules, I think next topic is also about the autoscaler. Do we want to go into that?
Yeah, sure. Just adding some notes.
I guess one more point before we move to the autoscaler I wanted to bring up was Stage, we had this discussion about using a common pool for some of the modules like insights and device health and stuff. I think that's still a good idea. We just have like one manager module pool versus different pools and insights doing its own thing.
Yeah, so common manager pool. Yeah, I agree. Yeah, that's probably one of the first things we should do this cycle. Is get that infrastructure in place so we can make use of it. it'll be a little bit tricky to have the transition for device health pool or whatever to convert over to be that, but yeah.
Okay, cool. For the autoscaler, bad. Junior, do you want to kick off this one? I know there are items that other parties are also interested, but maybe you can start off with what you're working on.
Sure. So me and Josh has been working on a kind of like creating a new behavior of how the autoscaler would work. So just a bit of background of the problem of the old autoscaler is that it starts out with like a minimum number of PGs for pool, and it scales up when the pools is like used more. This is a problem for like Ceph out of the box users if they are creating pools in a large cluster, and so they will have like a low performance at the start because there will be like the minimum number of pools, and it would only scale when there is like pressure, assuming that they don't know like how much usage like the cluster in general they're going to be using. So the new algorithm, how it works is that just in a high level term is that it starts out with like a full complement of PGs. So that's like so how much PGs the pools in general should be used. So like it depends on the amount of like OSDs and the monitor target PG per OSDs. So let's say there's like 4 OSDs, so 4 times like 100 would be 400, and assuming like the replication size of each pool is like 1, the full complement in this case would be like 400. And let's say there are 4 pools, and so when you start out with 4 pools, each pool would get 400 divided by 4. That's like 100 PGs each. And I guess like if you round it up to power of 2, that's 128 PGs each. But let's say pool 1 started using 50% of the capacity of the space. So how it works is that pool 1 will get 50% of like the full complements of PGs. In this case, is 200. Rounded up, power of 2 is 256, and the rest of the pools, pools 2, 3, and 4 would get so the 200 divided by 3, which is like 67 so it would get like 64 PGs. So that's just how it works, assuming like, let's say stuff like the bias is like 1. The problem with this that I encounter is that if you can see in the pad, there's a problem with when you for RGW with this new autoscaler. So when you start out the pool, for the device health monitor starts out with like 128 PGs, and when you're creating like RGW pools, the device health monitor did not scale down in time, so therefore that hits like the cap for mon-max PG per OSDs cap. And one of the solutions that I've been working on in fixing that is just to create a PG num max on is another feature. So basically just capping the number of PGs you're allowed, like each pool, just similar to how PG num min works. We could possibly do that on device health monitor pool. So that's where I wanted to discuss more on what we should do about that.
I think it definitely makes sense to put a cap on pools that we know shouldn't get big, but that doesn't solve the general problem. It only solves like one specific
right.
of it.
And how, if there is a generic rule, how do you decide what the max should be?
Right. Yeah, I think you can't.
So we do have like ways that like CephFS and RGW create their metadata pools, and they're already applying certain settings to them. So we could apply similar kinds of max settings for those metadata pools at least. I was thinking maybe this max should be like a percentage of the like PG budget rather than a fixed absolute number, though. Or like a very large cluster, you might want to have a more parallelism for your metadata. Does that make sense?
That definitely sounds better than a hard cap what the max should be. What you said is right. I mean, if we know what the application is going to be. Maybe we can determine those gaps based on whether it's RGW data pool or metadata pool, whatever. But it's just like a generic pool the user is trying to create. For those, it'll be hard to determine what those gaps should look like. Or we just have to go with something.
Yeah, for a generic pool, there aren't not sure that many of those these days. Like the data pools, you kind of want them to expand to fill the whole cluster. It's only the pools that aren't going to get so much data and can't use that level of parallelism that you don't want to have that many PGs.
Yeah. I mean, it seems like there's no substitute for actually having some information about what the pool is going to be. If we can somehow induce a user to set the target ratio on a pool, then we're going to like pick the right number the first time, and then we're not going to have to like split or merge pool. But in the absence of that information, we basically have two options. We either sort of start small and scale up as they fill up with data, or we start big with lots of PGs and then merge if more pools show up. I think actually the scaling up is more conservative, but the starting with like lots of PGs and scaling down is probably more likely to not move data, because in general the pools are going to get created at the beginning of the cluster before there's anything in there. So the PGs will fill up in place. I think the problem is just that there's this issue where we start hitting the PG cap when you start creating like a whole bunch of pools at once. But I think that might actually, like if we change two things, like if we got rid of that PG cap basically, or just made it like really big, that might be one thing. And also if we create a pool, we always create it with one PG, and we let the scaler scale it up in concert with scaling other things down, then we can avoid hitting those caps.
Yeah, that's the thing. Like the check right now is in the monitor, so it has no clue what the autoscaler is going to do once this pool is created.
Yeah.
So if we remove that cap from the monitor, check entirely, when the autoscaler is enabled, then let's let this autoscaler do its thing. Like I think when we were hitting this and testing, it wasn't even a pool that was being created with a particular PGNum, so it was just using the default low number. But because the autoscaler had already kind of used up the entire budget, and because of like the rounding, it ended up being close enough to the cap that we just went a little bit over.
I mean, if we made the initial PG count 1, then that also probably would have avoided the issue also, right? Unless you create 100 pools at once, we also won't hit the limit.
Right.
And we could just make that sure that the autoscaler sort of scales things down before it scales things up so that it doesn't bump into the limit, because the scaling down is much slower than the splits.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, there's no real reason to create a PG with 16 PGs out of the gate. You might as well just create it with
That's
one.
right. Yeah. I think we're probably applying the minimum settings in the monitor today, but we could just get rid of that and have it always be 1.
Yeah.
Even regardless of what the user specifies.
And if we hint whenever possible, like we set a cap on the device health monitor pool because we know it's going to be small, and the metadata pools, I think we already set initial limits. That'll mostly take care of it. I guess the one other sort of elephant in the room is that this was such a shock when it happened when I was testing the Pacific upgrade, because as soon as the manager upgraded, which was like the very first step of the upgrade, suddenly PGs went crazy, right? There was a bunch of splitting, all the whatever, everything went nuts. And so I think on upgrade, like I don't know that we want to like.
Yeah, I think we need to wait to face it in.
Like,
so like we need to switch the turn on and off this behavior, so you can keep the old behavior on by default, and then after you upgrade, you can turn it on, knowing that this may cause a lot of data movement.
Yeah, or even like a autoscaler profile or something. So there's like the conservative profile that has the current behavior where things start small to scale up, and there's like a new profile that we introduce that's this new behavior that isn't the default for upgraded clusters, but is for new clusters or something like that.
Yeah, I think that would make sense.
Yeah.
And then if we have a new behavior further in the future, it could be a new profile.
Yeah.
Yep. That's kind of what we did with. Yeah. Sorry, go ahead.
And the auto scale status, you could have an optional argument of what, well, you want to see what it would do. So you can just
Mm-hmm.
what it would do before you actually do it. Then
That's
we
exactly
can
what we did with the autoscale warn and on, right? That's what we did for existing clusters when we introduced the autoscaler. It was always in warn, so you knew what you would get into if you turn it on. So it's kind of similar.
Yeah. Yeah. Profiles. Yep.
So another thing that came up related to the autoscaler was that we have some of these warnings, like the warning about object skew. And I'm not sure if there may be a few others like this that we introduced before the autoscaler existed to try to warn people about PGs being imbalanced or not having too few or too many or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
With the autoscaler around and on by default now, it doesn't seem like these warnings are going to be that helpful. There's not a lot that users should be doing about them in most cases.
Do they actually happen with the autoscaler on?
Yep.
Yeah, we've seen like this one with object skew happen. I think just because there's like some pool that was used a lot more than another pool or something like that. I forget what the scenario was.
I think there were a lot of small objects in the pools. Your autoscaler let that happen, but then this warning popped up, which technically was not useful. So I guess if we want to keep this warning, we only should warn if the autoscaler is not on for whatever reason, or if somebody.
Yeah. That's one option, but I mean the only thing I worry about is like maybe that warning is pointing to a problem with the autoscaler behavior. The autoscaler's doing the right thing. But for the sake of like user sanity, probably just skipping that warning if the mode is on. Do the thing.
Yeah, we should probably go through and look at the other kinds of warnings out there. There might be a few others like this.
Yeah.
And maybe some other checks on the monitor too, I forget.
Can we start developing a mechanism for reporting warnings to like developers that we think a module is misbehaving without alerting users to catch stuff like that autoscaler isn't doing what we want?
Could add that to the telemetry.
The telemetry, yeah. Yeah, I wonder if probably just like a pass over what telemetry is collecting and making sure it has all of the relevant inputs that the autoscaler would be using. So we can.
I don't think it has like the full PG map. Or OSD map.
But it could have like a list of pools with the PG min max, number of objects, number of bytes, number of whatever, like all the sort of relevant inputs that would get fed into the autoscaler algorithm, minus the names and application tags or whatever.
And the crush tree that tells you, I guess you could have that route at least, but.
Yeah. There might be some refactoring needed with the auto balancer, the balancer code, so that you could actually feed in like a telemetry input into the algorithm and see what it would do. But if we did that, that would be pretty nice, because in any potential change, we could just like throw it at the whole telemetry population and just see what it would do.
You're talking about the balancer, right? The OSD map tool has an option to simulate some of this. If you feed in an existing OSD map, it'll tell you what kind of balancing. A dry run that it does already. David added that at some point. It also has there's some settings like the deviation, like the upmap balancer has a deviation. You can simulate a different value of deviation check how that would help or not help.
Yeah. Okay, well, I mean, just to summarize, it seems like the main takeaways to action items are probably the creating pools with one PG instead of whatever, and disabling the relevant min warnings, probably so that doesn't trigger health issues immediately. And then adding the profile mechanism. Because once we have profiles in place, then we can reintroduce this new behavior. Yeah.
I think that's a good.
Yeah, maybe this general PG min, PG max warnings or others if you disable when the autoscaler is on, just in case we accidentally trigger them.
Yeah.
Anything else on the topic? No? Okay, go on to the next one. So this is about avoiding cluster log messages to go through Paxos and storing them in the model. There are a couple of pull requests here which have some context. So the pull requests here in the chat.
Yeah, let's use this Etherpad to take the notes. So I think there's a couple of dimensions to this, but
yeah.
But I guess fundamentally we've run into this a few times where we've had a lot of extra detail from coming into the cluster log, like slow requests, reports, or causing the monitor to store them in the database, and the database to eventually fill up since we weren't matching the ingest rate with the deletion rate. Aishwarya is already addressing this with our patches that were merged last week, and you want to talk a little bit about those?
Yeah, sure. So the change that's been merged, basically what that does is that we dynamically change what amount of logs are trimmed. Before this change, we used to have an upper bound specified by Paxos service trim max. So according to the log ingest rate, right now we just change the max accordingly. So hopefully we won't have a very high number of logs being stored in MonitorDB with this change. But yeah, basically that's what it does.
I guess, I mean, what Aishwarya's PR does is much better than what we had earlier, where somebody had to manually go change some setting after the monitor had already, the MonitorDB had already filled up to maintain the ingest rate versus the trimming rate. But I guess the bigger question is that, is there a need for all this to be stored, go through Paxos and stored in the MonDB, or not? Or like, what is the historical significance of how something that it's not clear?
The historic reason was just to have a consistent view of what the cluster log contained, and because everything was persisted through Paxos, so it was easy. I mean, I kind of like the simplicity of everything that the monitor stores always being consistent and always going through Paxos. Feels like if there are specific issues with that, then either it doesn't belong in the monitor at all, or we need to make it work right. Like the ingest versus trimming, like that's something that we just need to fix, right? That was just really just
that's a general problem, not just a log problem. So because we've seen that with OSD maps as well in the past.
I suspect that a fairly big part of the problem, maybe not. One part of the problem is also just that the way the log monitor is implemented is like not efficient at all. Like there's a log summary class or something that has like the last 100 entries, and it's basically that entire structure is rewritten on every commit. Like it's just totally, the way it's persisted is just totally stupid. And that was just because it was like expedient, I think.
But I think the way how we are using the cluster log is wrong, because I think the cluster log is for random message, human readable message, which is very critical and which should get the attention of the administrator immediately, which should call for human intervening at this very moment, instead of for some slow operations. I think the slow operation should be sent to manager, to a module. For example, the alert module you created, it could be repurposed for collecting the subscribe the slow message. For example, when the alert module notices that there is some slow operation going on, it is supposed to collect the details from the daemons, which has slow messages, and log it into a local database, which is not hosted by Ceph cluster. And later on, when the administrator log on to the system using the dashboard or something, he or she will notice that something goes wrong and will pull the data along with the timestamp and figure out what was going on and look into the log or whatever he or she can find. Instead of looking at the class log. Class log is for something, a system is going wrong or something big happens, instead of a slow ops, which happens all the time.
Yep, I agree with that.
So I think the thing with the slow ops though is that that information is very helpful in the cluster log, because it's a very simple place to match up what is going on with the entire cluster state. I don't think we need to have all details of every single slow request, which is what we currently do.
Yeah.
Yes.
We just need some.
We already implemented such kind of facilities using CLog for for aggregated slow log. We already have them.
I think what's missing those that we have the aggregate, but not, and like the full detail, but nothing in between. Like we don't have like a detail saying like here's like the top 10 slow requests or something.
Yeah, that kind of thing should go to manager.
I think as a practical matter, when you're like debugging an issue, like you need to know that there are like 10,000 flow ops.
Yeah.
And you need to know like the first 10 of them, so you can go
exactly.
like, spot check one, and that's it.
Exactly.
Like you don't actually need all 10,000 of them.
Exactly.
I would say that you need to know which PGs are experiencing slow ops. So even just a stat line in the PG stats would do the job. You don't even need to list the slow requests at all.
Yeah, like aggregated.
Just this PG is as of this OSD map epoch, or as of this reporting interval, seeing slow ops. That's it.
You want to see which stage they're stuck at too. They're all stuck on Q2PG or.
True, but you can go to the OSD and dump it.
Yeah, if you have a cluster in that configuration. But the reason that's been so helpful in the cluster logs is to be able to see the history and what happened in the past state.
True.
Yeah, I guess the idea is that if you don't have the ability to do right, but if you don't have the ability to do live debugging or like capture the state of the OSD at that moment, having that like the initial information of where the initial slow ops were or why they were in the cluster log as an afterthought has been often useful.
As a middle ground, perhaps the monitor could notice that slow ops are happening and then choose a filtering function that it remembers. That way, when a slow op shows up, it'll generally report that slow op again in the future, but not others. But I wonder whether the cluster log is the correct place to store that information, given the problems we're observing.
Maybe. Seems like it'd be even better to filter it before sending the more detailed information anywhere, like on the OSD side as well.
But I guess my like the beginning of this conversation, I think, was, is the cluster log the right place to put this? Or more generally, is something that goes through Paxos the right place to put that kind of detailed tracing information?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Probably not. Except like maybe just like the slowest one, or maybe a summary. I mean, you could imagine having like the OSDs are sending regular messages to the manager with their like perf counters and all that stuff. They could also just send like their top 10 slow stops, right?
Yeah. Or the other way around. Yeah, the manager could ask the OSD for more details, because we have the tail command implemented, and it serves for the same purpose.
Yeah.
For querying the slow ops.
Well, I mean, the managers could offer a general purpose sampled logging mechanism without needing to go through the monitor's Paxos system. I'm saying we could have not a logging system that isn't the cluster log, that serves the same purpose the cluster log currently does, but without screwing up the monitors.
We could have a manager log.
It would probably still be called the cluster log. It just wouldn't go through Paxos.
Yes. I mean, the implementation details, it come from manager instead of from the monitors.
Yep. I think somewhat separate from this, at some point somebody should like clean up the way that log monitor is storing its data in RxDB, because it's kind of annoying the way that it's trimmed.
Yeah. I mean, do we need with the way? I mean, do we need to store that information in the database at all? We're already writing it out to a log file.
I think it's nice because you have there's a log last command that like dumps the last few messages, and actually one of the things that I wanted to do was change it. When you do Ceph-W, you can give it the channel name. I wanted to combine that with the logs command so that you could do like a equivalent of a tail-f. You do a logs, what the channel is, number of recent entries, and then also block and pull or whatever to follow the log. It would be nice to have like a more user-friendly experience there, because I frequently find myself typing Ceph log last Ceph ADM semicolon Ceph-W Ceph ADM, like watch the log. That's super annoying.
I mean, you could. I mean, it ends up in a text file, and so we can maintain a text file not through Paxos, but like Paxos is the way the monitors share.
I get the Paxos is there. I don't think Paxos is the big problem though. It's more the database itself, like the storing tons of information there.
Well, so if we cut it down by 2 orders of magnitude, the size of the log, would that just fix it?
I mean, I think Paxos only has to store the last 1,000 lines or something like that, or whatever it is. It doesn't have to store that much.
And so if what's happening is that every one of those entries is sorting 100 log lines, and maybe that's the real problem, and it's not that it's in the log at all, or that it's not in Paxos at all.
Yeah. Maybe once we fix that, then it won't ever see this issue again. Although
one problem is the number of the log lines. Another problem is that all the lines need to go through the Paxos. That's another burden over the shoulder of the monitors.
I mean,
they're
need collated though.
Mechanism too. Like we have also seen this in the past where this was triggered by just continuous warnings going through the cluster log. So I think we probably need some kind of throttling mechanism to prevent ourselves from adding too many log messages.
One of the PRs that I pasted is that
if it's not collated, then it should be, but I'm pretty sure it is. Like you don't guarantee a Paxos commit for every single entry.
It is collated, but if you're generating thousands of these for every second, it doesn't help.
Okay.
Do we have a conclusion? According to how to.
Yeah, I guess.
I want to get it fixed, and I think the right way to do it is to let the manager do its job instead of monitor.
So we already have like the OSD, the stops being reported to the manager and aggregate, maybe we can just add a little bit more detail there to like each daemon reports the top 5 or top n more detailed information.
Yes. Okay. I think that's
maybe we need the CLI command to just like show the slow ups or something, so we can inspect that info. I don't know how you see it.
Well, we want to have that logged into the manager log by default, so because we want to have that historically preserved.
Oh yeah. Okay.
Sure.
Yep.
Okay.
That's the big benefit for the cluster log today.
Yeah.
Okay, the conclusion is that we redirected to the manager log and we don't have any kind of slow up information in the cluster log.
We still have the summary probably, but
it'd be nice to have the summary, as what Sage was suggesting, when it started happening and how many slow ups. Only that kind of information. I don't think that should be very heavy.
Yeah, I don't think that's cause any issues, but the more detailed information about the individual ops that can just be in the manager log.
Mm-hmm.
And only a limited subset.
Agreed.
Okay. I put a couple notes in the pad. I don't know. Add more if that doesn't capture everything.
Are we using the same pad? I don't see those.
Oh, was there a different pad? I just put it in the agenda pad.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Okay, I think we're at the top of the hour. Let's move on to the next topics, maybe. We'll have 2 more topics to go through. Ifu, do you want to just kick off the next one?
Yes. I think I'm putting the details in the chat in another etherpad. I'm pasting it to your in the chat window. So the idea is that we could simplify the document writing because we are repeating. Typically, when we add an option, we added it to 3 places. If that option should be read or write in the critical path. The first place is the Lego options.cc, and another place is option.cc, which is for so we can read it using getval. And the third place is the .rc file, which is rendered into a Sphinx document. So I think the better way to do it is add a option in a single place. I propose a solution so we can add the option in a YAML file with a predefined scheme, which is flexible enough so we can even write some C++ code in it. And it's inflexible structured enough so we can use a Python script to extract the interested information from it and generate RC file. And the more interesting thing that we could generate different versions from a single source of a YAML file. For example, if a certain option is only consumed by OSD, we can extract the part of options which is read by common, libcif common, and the subset of OSD subset of options which are only interested by OSD. That could potentially reduce a little bit memory footprint. And I think we've been thinking about just a off-topic subject is that we've been thinking about to split the message.h into some smaller pieces, right? Because some messages are never seen by a OSD if that message is passed between monitors. I think that's the same idea.
Yeah. Yep. I like that. That I mean, options.cc is super annoying to edit anyway because it's like that. Yeah, it's annoying.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's a fantastic idea. We've used something like this for a long time, and it's always a pain to having the options in the docs updated, and some options, even if they're there, maybe the defaults are changed.
Yeah, we can even add more text. For example, frequently used or not so frequently used. That kind of tag is not interested for the applications, but it might be interested from the dashboard developer point of view, because we might want to display them in using different ways.
Yep.
Highlight them using different schemes.
Exactly. That's what we were talking about earlier, right? I mean, what the users should know about and what we don't need to expose through the dashboard. That kind of flagging is really good.
Yeah.
One thing we probably want to think about if we're going to the point where we're generating the RST docs, the other place where options exist is in PyBind manager, whatever, module.py.
Yep. Yes. Exactly. Yes.
Yes. There's some, but how is this related to this abstract configuration variables?
Because if it's that last step of generating the documentation, the doc RADOS configuration, the manager modules should feed into that as well. Right.
I think that they have their own options that you can set with the usual commands.
Yes, that can do. We can do that.
They might not be documented in the same place, but maybe they should be. I don't know.
It could. Actually, we generate the module document from the module source code at this moment. We can go further by extract the options and the commands out of it. Currently, we extract the commands out of the source code.
Oh, cool. Okay. I like command.
Okay.
So you think this would be able to like feed into the existing structure of the docs, where you would have like different sections referencing different pieces of the doc of the different options based on like a tag or something, or would it be like one page for just a reference for all the options?
I think we could start with some basic commands. By first step is to convert the option.cc to a YAML file, and whip up a Python script to generate the .cc file and the legacy.h file from this YAML file, and then expand this script so it can generate a subset of the options and render it using for example, a Jinja template to our RST and render it using Sphinx. Later on, we can expand it by adding more labels and schemes.
Okay, so we can have like a Sphinx command that would say include all the options related to X in this section.
Yeah, and later on we can filter the YAML file by the tags. So we can generate three copies, for example, one for OSD, another for MDS, and another for monitors. For example, the fourth one is for the clients.
Yeah, I think that would be great.
Probably like, 5 of them are RDW and also, yes.
Yeah, I'm thinking of our existing configuration documentation. There's a lot of kind of expository text about the general category of options and then the options themselves. So if we could do the filtering, be able to keep that like the general description.
The dashboard will you'll be using the same filter, because from the RGW administrator's point of view, what he or she will be interested is common options and RGW options. So.
Cool. That sounds great.
Well, I think everybody's on the same page for this one, so we just move on to the last topic.
Sure.
Yeah, this is about automated auth key rotation and things. I hope to say a little bit about this. Did you want
to? Yeah. So this was ignored for a long time because we didn't have encrypted sessions between daemons and the monitor, and so any sort of automated key rotation would just start sending keys over the wire. So it was actually would be worse. But now we have messengers to secure mode, so no more excuses. I think that there are two big challenges. The first is that we basically need a two-phase commit because we need to update the key both on the monitor database and on the client. And if we update only one and not the other, and a system restarts or something like that, then something can't authenticate. So we have to be a little bit careful. And then the other challenge is that it's one thing to do this so that you update the key and then restart the daemon, but that's kind of disruptive. It'd be nice to be able to update the keys without restarting the thing, the OSD, for example, especially when you have warm caches and all the rest of it. So there, at a high level, I think there's one really big decision point here. There are two options for doing that two-phase thing. Either the monitor keeps track of both the old key and the pending new key, and either key works for an interim period while the client is being updated, which means that on the monitor, all the auth paths need to be updated so that if the client tries to authenticate with either the old key or the new key, they'll both work, which is sort of hairy. We need to make sure we address all the paths. We can focus that just on the Messenger 2 stuff and not on the legacy stuff, so that makes it a little bit better, but we need to make sure that that's done properly.
Sage?
Yeah?
Sorry to interrupt, but can you talk about what the goals are of doing this automated key rotation before we talk about our options for it?
Yeah, I mean,
that we need to rotate every 6 months for compliance reasons, or are we trying to allow updates to keys to permissions while they're live, or?
I think the goal is compliance. This is something that users ask for. And it also seems just like a bad security practice to have a key that's been in use for 3 years, that's been sitting on a drive, and who knows whether it's been exposed during that period or not.
So that's not related to the daemon key rotation, internal key rotation. That's a complete different topic.
What do you mean?
In Ceph, there is the daemons themselves. You have a service key rotation.
Yeah, that's unrelated. Yeah, no, these are the shared secrets that clients and daemons would have.
Another topic that's separate would be the disk key, like the LUKS encryption keys. Is there some kind of provision? I thought there was some kind of provision in LUKS that where you could rotate those keys by having having a key that's encrypted with another key, and you rotate the key encrypting key or something like that.
Yeah, I mean we do have two key encrypting keys. Obviously, you can't change the actual encryption key, but the key encryption key could be rotated. So probably a similar mechanism would need to be used in that case too. That one's probably a little bit easier because it's there's only one place where the decrypt is started up, and so it's identifying the path that needs to try two different keys would be a little bit simpler. But I think even then it's a similar. There's this question of which.
The OSD keys that the client authenticate against are the session keys, and these are based on the rotating keys, the temporary ones that are every 30 minutes.
Yeah,
right?
That's different though. Yeah, this would be the per OSD secret that it uses to authenticate to the monitor.
So the OSD okay.
So this only affects the daemon itself, not anything else in the system.
Yeah, I think we would automate OSD keys and MDS keys, the manager keys, like those would be the ones that would be easy to automate. Clients are harder because we don't have necessarily the control over how the client is being used, although I think it might be possible to do that too. I have a question down here about that. But right, so I guess there are these two options, right? Either you have like the old key and the new key both available on the monitor, and the client will use it whatever key it has, and either if it's old it'll work, and if it's new it'll work. Or you flip it around and you have the client has its old key and it has the new key, and you install the new key on the monitor, and then if there's a failure or whatever, you make it so that the client is responsible for trying two different keys and seeing which one works. I'm kind of leaning toward option one, having it done on the monitor, because they're sort of the way we can narrow down the cases. And it might even be that the idea of having multiple keys associated with the same auth entity might actually be a good thing also in general. I'm not really entirely sure. Maybe not, maybe that's silly, but it seems like it's a little bit tidier that way. But that's sort of the first question to answer. The next is around, maybe not a question, but the next real challenge is making the mon client and the auth protocol such so that you can do a key rotation, so that when you're renewing your ticket, you could try using the new key and it would transition seamlessly from the old key, so that an existing session would be able to transition from an old key to a new key without being interrupted. And that, I think, needs a more careful read of the auth code to see exactly how that would be implemented. I don't think Delia is here, unfortunately, but we probably need to brainstorm on that, figure out exactly how that would work. And that's assuming that we actually want to be able to do this without restarting daemons. If we think it's tolerable to just, if you rotate every 6 months, for example, and you just like restart daemons as you do it, then you can use sort of a simpler solution.
I can see that being an issue, like on the client side, if talking about like a very long-lived kernel client that's serving many different cases on a given host, you probably don't want to reconnect all those clients.
Right. Yeah, exactly. Yep. Yeah, so I think being able to, I think it's a good idea to teach the mon client basically how to, and the auth protocol or whatever, how to transition from an old key to a new key while it's online. And so there's sort of some hypothetical scenarios here, like the client would generate a new key and install it on the monitor, and then it would re-authenticate using a new one, and then the monitor, perhaps as soon as it sees that if you successfully use the new key, then it would commit it as the active key. And you could, tell the client to do this using a tell command, something like that. There are a few things. There's sort of another question of how you actually update the key on the client. Like, would you want Ceph ADM to like update the keyring file, or would you want the process that, like the mon client, for example, that you just told to go do this sort of online key change to rewrite its own keyring file? And in the case of BlueStore, you also have to remember that the keyring file is actually on a tempfs, was started up with set volume, and so you need to actually update the field in the store super block or whatever to have the actual keyring there. So there'll be a bit of a kludge there to make sure that works. And then the last challenge is around kernel clients, because that's a sort of a separate implementation, and it's a little bit more awkward because mount.ceph probably needs to be able to accept, if you go the two keys on the client, it needs to have both keys. But the kernel is not going to be able to rewrite its keyring file, so you're going to have some other like helper utility or whatever that runs on the client host that pokes sysfs or whatever to tell Ceph to go change its key, and then updates wherever the keyring file is stored in etc or whatever it is. So it'll be a little bit tricky. We need to make sure that we standardize the way that those kernel clients are managed. Right now, I think mount.ceph doesn't take a traditional keyring file, which has sort of been a feature ticket that's open in our tracker for like 10 years now, but it might be a good time to actually implement that. And then
No, it does now, Sage.
Oh, it does?
It
Okay.
actually reads the config file, the Ceph config, and then uses the monitor IPs and also the Ceph keyring.
Oh, good. Okay, cool. But yeah, so there's some details there, but I think we could probably kick those and do those last. I think that the two questions that I have as far as like which path to go are this first question about whether the monitor has sort of two keys and either one works for that temporary transition period, or whether the client has the two keys and tries both of them. That's the first question. And then the second question is whether it's a good idea to have the actual daemon or client code rewriting its own keyring file, or whether we want some external tool to be doing it for you, like Ceph ADM, trying to orchestrate this whole thing.
Would Ceph ADM even be able to do that with something like the OSD and BlueStore? And it's already in use by the running daemon?
It probably could, but it would probably be a bad idea. Yeah, probably not. Yeah. So probably what that would mean then. Go ahead.
Have we investigated if there are regulatory requirements for doing the rotation? Like if it is like being through an alternate pathway or something?
I don't know. Neha, do you know where this requirement came from on the business plan?
Yeah, I think we've got a customer, downstream customer requesting this feature, but it's for security reasons. But yeah, I'm not aware of the details, but I can find out.
I was going to say, I think that probably the practical implication of this having the daemon rewrite its own querying file is just the way that the permissions are set up. We need to make sure that the file is writable by the process that runs it or whatever. I suspect that's probably fine in all the current deployments because it'll be owned by user Ceph. But yeah, I don't think it'd be an issue. Maybe not.
I know for the system unit files, we don't allow access to Etsy, so or you can read-only access to Etsy, but I don't think we do that with Ceph ADM. In fact, I'm not sure what. This is kind of off topic, but I'm not sure what kind of protections we have in the system unit files we generate with Ceph ADM. Maybe that's something we should look at because there's a divergence there.
It looks like Ceph ADM is deploying it. The keyring file is in its little directory for the container, and it's owned by user Ceph, so it should be able to rewrite it just fine. In general, nothing gets, for daemons at least, daemons don't use Etsy Ceph at all. The only time Ceph ADM uses Etsy Ceph is when you use the shell command. And that's mostly just so that you can have, if there is an Etsy Ceph on the host, that's sort of like the default cluster, that the ADM shell will bring up, so you don't have to pass all the arguments all the time. That's more of a convenience thing. Okay, well, I guess the action items are probably just to, Neha, if you could check the source and see if there are any additional constraints. And then probably going to lean towards seeing if option 1 is feasible. If there are a small enough number of paths that the monitor can do it, I think that's probably going to make a little bit more sense. And then, yeah, just diving into the authentication code of the Mon client and figuring out how to make this work.
I think let me find out more about the requirements there, and maybe we can circle back on this topic in a CDM session or something. When Ilya is also around. Be good to have.
Yeah. Yep. Okay. That's probably all we need.
Cool. Well, that's all the topics that we have listed here. Any more last minute topics? Nope.
I don't think so.
All right then. Thank you everyone for joining the CDS radar session, and see you guys later. Thanks.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, everybody. Thank you.
Thanks.
Bye-bye.
See you.
Thanks. Bye.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Bye.
Later. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.